Thank you everybody for joining us today, where we'll be talking about climate resilience and advocacy. I can start us off. So, my name is Alan Cardenas, and I am from LO Seattle. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the one of the co-program coordinators here in Seattle. Melanie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Melanie Garate. I use pronouns she, her, and ella, and I'm the program coordinator for Latino Outdoors in Boston.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yes, I'm
Uh,
so excited to have you. Alrighty. So we're going to start off by just sharing a little bit more about ourselves beyond what chapters we're representing, and then we're going to get into talking about climate resilience. So, Alan, I would love to learn about your story and how you got to the current role that you're at now, and in general, the Low community.
Yeah, of course. So I always like to joke around and say that I got involved in Latino outdoors and the outdoor industry as a whole because I accidentally posted a picture of myself outside, and all of a sudden I'm volunteering working in the outdoor industry. Um, I didn't really grow up going outside. I didn't do sports as a kid. It just wasn't my thing, and my family wasn't really interested in camping or hiking or anything like that. And I grew up in a fairly urban area in Central California. And I was really fortunate. I When I was in university, I got to study abroad, and I studied abroad in Argentina, and that's actually where I met a lot of people who like took me hiking for the first time, and like I saw lots. I got to see some trails there, and then. Some friends who I went running with in high school took me to some trails in California as well, but especially in college, when I was in college, I got to see some trails and things like that, and I just really fell in love with being outside and getting a little dirty and walking around. And eventually, I just heard about Latino Outdoors through the grapevine, and it was an account that I had followed for a while, and eventually I finally decided to reach out and say, hey, wanted to volunteer. So I started volunteering with Latino Outdoors in early 2019. And I actually started with the DC chapters, the DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And I was only there for about 6 months or so. And then from there, I moved to Seattle. So I've been in Seattle since September of 2019, so about 2.5 years now. And that entire time, I was an outings leader. And for the past year, I've been program coordinator here in Seattle. But aside from that, I really just grown and leaned into this whole outdoor industry. I Some of the outdoor things I like to do are like hiking. I like to do climbing every now and then when I get a chance to, and I've been getting into mountaineering. Still have a lot to learn, but trying to climb snowy peaks. Um,
That's
uh,
amazing.
I'd Thanks. I'd love to hear about how you got into LO and in your history with this.
Yeah, definitely. So I my connection to nature really starts with my ancestors in Chile, so also in South America. It's so cool that you studied abroad in Argentina. But I was born there, and I spent most of my childhood there. And with my dad, we just were the first ones in the water and the last ones out of the water. So my first real connection to the outdoors was going to the ocean and just going swimming in the Pacific Ocean, staying out there as long as possible, or swimming in pools wherever that was possible, or sometimes even in rivers. And other than that, I really had no other connection to the outdoors. And so when we moved to the States, out here in Boston, where I spent the rest of my childhood, we just transferred all of that passion over to the Atlantic Ocean. Not the same. I feel like there's lots of people connected here that are from the West Coast, and you know, West Coast is not West Coast Pacific Ocean, not the same as Atlantic, but you know, I'll take it. It's still beautiful. And so we continued, you know, going to the beach every summer. We usually get there at 8 a.m. and leave at like 7 p.m. Or 8, depending on when the sun's setting. And so all of that forced me to really think about what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I decided to be a marine biologist. And so then I studied marine science in undergrad and then graduate school. And through all of those experiences, I started hiking, just meeting people, started camping, but I never really saw people who look like me, and meaning specifically people of color and Latinx people. And so when I found Latino Outdoors on Instagram, I was just like, what? This is a revelation. There's people like me out there who like to do all of the same things that I do, and who also have very similar cultural backgrounds. And so I fell in love, but honestly, I just thought it was an Instagram thing for many, many years. I didn't realize that it was a national organization that had volunteers and different chapters until I went online during the pandemic to an online event hosted by Jose Gonzalez, and he was speaking with Dolores Huerta. And then I saw like in the chat or something like that, there was a Lowell, Massachusetts. And so then I got connected to Sebastian from Western Massachusetts, which is kind of the more rural part of Massachusetts, and have been volunteering ever since. My chapter in Boston is slowly rising. We're slowly getting a team together. So I've done a few programs and trying to get a crew out here in the Boston area, because the Boston area is so transient with so many universities and many prestigious universities. It can be hard to find like a solid community, and so I'm really looking for people who are also rooted in the community here. So very exciting to put all of that together and to be part of this amazing national community.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really loved how you touched upon the community and how finding community can sometimes be difficult, because I think that's what a lot of us LO volunteers went through, is we were trying to find people like us who enjoy doing the same things that we do. And I'm so happy that we've been able to create this community, and that us being in Seattle and Boston, we're able to connect and talk about things that matter to us.
Exactly. Yeah. I love
it. So we are here to talk about climate resilience and advocacy, and those are two pretty big terms, and they can mean different things to different people, but I think there's a general shared understanding of what they can mean, or what they usually mean. But Melanie, I wanted to know if you could help define climate resilience for us.
Sure. So I work in climate resilience in the Boston area. So that's kind of my 9-to-5 job. And what that really entails is understanding that climate change is here. So regardless of how much we reduce our carbon emissions and switch to green energy or clean energy or green energy, we still have some of that climate baked in, and we're seeing climate impacts happening already. So California is an very strong example of all of the increasing wildfires that are occurring, the increasing droughts, and then out here on the East Coast, we're getting more, hotter summers than we're used to having, and lots of storms and increased precipitation when we do have storms. And so climate resilience is about figuring out how we adapt to all of that. So how can we protect and prepare our natural environment, our built environment, and then also our people? And so climate resilience is about making all of that holistically resilient. But right now, as it stands within this climate resilience sector, in terms of a professional sector, it's really focused on the natural environment and the built environment, like what costs more necessarily, and is tailored towards the middle class. And so what my work thinks about specifically is how do we actually focus on the communities that are most in need? And something that I want to bring to Latino Outdoors is how can we actually focus on the Latinx community that is being impacted now by climate, and help them become resilient against it. And I'll share just one example that kind of connects to it. This isn't climate resilience, but some people may understand it through this lens. So in Chile, for example, there are lots of earthquakes. You know, we live on a zone that has a lot of earthquakes similar to California. And so our built infrastructure, like our houses and our hospitals and our public transportation system, is built to withstand those earthquakes so that the buildings are, able to move when an earthquake happens. And so there's very little destruction that actually happens. So how can we do the same, but for a big hurricane or for increasing extreme heat during the summertime and things like that?
Thank you so much for providing those examples. That really helps put it into context. And it really sounds like you're doing like really great work and such interesting stuff with it. I had two questions I wanted to ask you about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Do you mind talking about some of like the funding issues that sometimes comes with this type of work?
Yeah, definitely. So there's lots of funding issues in general. So one is just big picture. We need more funding because climate change is expensive, and it's really hard to find that funding. So we're really thankful that the infrastructure bill did pass at the federal level, which is then being funneled to different states. And it's supposed to be 40% of that funding going to environmental justice communities. We'll see if that actually happens or how that actually plays out. I think some states will do that better than others, of course. But in terms of getting funding for environmental justice communities around climate resilience and other climate and environmental justice issues, it can be really hard because, like I said, any sort of response and recovery during a big storm or during long-term changes is tailored towards the middle class. And so we have to have strong advocates, speaking of advocacy, on the ground to make sure that that happens. Because if it doesn't happen, if we don't use our voice and our power, then it simply won't, and it'll stay the status quo and go to the middle or upper class. So folks can have their luxury condos by the ocean, and people keep getting pushed out of those areas via gentrification. And so funding is a really big issue, and that's why we have to advocate for all of that funding to come to environmental justice communities. And then once it's there, figuring out how to equitably allocate it. Yeah. Do you have anything to add about that, Ellen?
I guess I do want to like tackle it from sort of a different perspective. I don't work in climate resilience, but I do work in the conservation outdoor recreation world. I work for the National Park Service, and I do visitor use management planning. So I don't work at any one park specifically, but rather I work at a lot of parks and I help develop plans. I mostly work towards helping parks manage visitors, and really the perspective that I take with that is not that we are ever trying to limit visitors. We're trying to address the issues like how can we make sure that everybody can enjoy the parks in a way that is good for everybody. As you can imagine, there are lots of challenges in trying to answer that question. But I do work with a lot of natural resource experts on these plans, and what we're finding in our planning efforts is that we need to plan for the future and plan for and integrate climate resilience into our planning. So as you know, there's parks all over the country, some in Boston, some here in Seattle, and there are glaciers receding, there are hotter summers happening, and it's causing a lot of problems at parks. And we're not able to provide the services that we're not able to provide the services and the park experiences to guests. There's safety concerns with that. There's cultural resources concerns with that. So planning for the future is presenting a lot of problems, and even we ourselves sometimes have funding issues because there's only so many personnel to go around, but the issues just keep piling up as climate change continues to progress, and the problems keep piling on one on top of another. So we're finding that we need to get creative, and in a way that is sort of addressing how can one solution address three different problems at once. Sometimes it works. Sometimes we have to rethink it and redo those plans and make it work a little bit better.
Yeah, you bring up such good points around the natural environment. And so I'm coming at it from a social resilience perspective, and then you're coming at it from an environmental resilience perspective. And all of that is needed. And so for those who are listening in now or in the future, it's just important to figure out, well, where do I want to use my voice? Where is my voice the strongest? And how can I advocate for that side? That's awesome. I'm curious, Alan. Oh, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious how climate is impacting your community. So I think you talked a little bit about the natural environment, if you want to say more to that, and then also to people on the ground out there in Seattle or any other, whatever, however you identify your community.
Yeah. When I think about how is it affecting your community, I really do think about how it is affecting Seattle and the Puget Sound area, and the Pacific Northwest. I have only been here for about 2.5 years, so still getting to know the area. But I will say that I have grown to love this area and love the people that I've met in this area very much so. And it has become and is like it's continuing to grow and to be an important place and part of my life. And when I think about things like environmental justice and climate change and how it impacts where I live, I feel like I can't pass up the opportunity to really just address the gravity of the situation. Last year in the summer, the Pacific Northwest as a whole, so it included Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia in Canada. We had a massive, unprecedented heat wave. It was um, I did some research on it just to make sure I had my facts straight, but it is considered one of the deadliest, if not the deadliest, weather-related event in Washington. In Washington, we had 112 people die. Oregon was 116, and British Columbia was about 595 individuals. So we had well over 700. We tragically had over 700 people lose their lives to this heat, and it was just so unprecedented and so odd because that doesn't happen here. I remember when I first moved here, I was apartment searching, and it was an 85-degree day, and someone said, "Oh, you really decided to apartment hunt on the hottest day of the year." During that heat wave, Seattle reached 109. I know that is common in some places, but that is not common here, and the infrastructure is not built for that. Most houses here don't have air conditioning. Businesses had to shut down. Restaurants couldn't open. They just couldn't keep up with the electricity demands. The grids were breaking down. Even our highways were buckling because they just couldn't. They couldn't stand the heat, and the metal in the roads was expanding, and highways were buckling all up and down the state. It was a really upsetting and tragic event. I believe in the 100 years prior to the heat wave, Seattle itself had only gone past 100 degrees 3 times. And during that heat wave, we passed 100 degrees 3 times, 3 days in a row. It was miserable. It was tragic, and it really affects it. As you were talking about, it's vulnerable people who are affected the most. Here in Seattle, one of the traditionally Latinx communities is around Beacon Hill. It has gone through a lot of gentrification in the past few years, but uh, uh, it was just really tragic because a lot of people they don't have the infrastructure to keep cool. People were sick. A lot of people were literally just driving in their cars to keep cool, and it proved to be a really difficult time. And I do think to that a lot. And there's so many things that it was really just
Really hard.
unavoidable. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really hard, and thanks so much for sharing. And I think that kind of pain is really hard to witness and feel like, you don't like what do I do with this? And it can be really hard. In Boston, we have a very similar issue, and I can, if you all, I lost you for a second.
Oh,
If you
oh,
if
there
you
you
all
are.
hold, am I back?
Yeah.
If you all hold on for a little bit, I can give us some examples of the work that we're doing out here in Boston that is actually helping about towards heat waves. And so that way you get a little bit of hope is what I'm trying to say. But in Boston, it's very similar. And so if we're speaking about heat, that is one of the main things that is impacting our area, but it's going relatively unnoticed because everybody thinks about hurricanes and people think about big fires in California and in the desert, or sea level rise, but they don't think about heat necessarily. And so heat is actually the #1 cause of weather-related deaths in the United States compared to all other weather-related deaths combined. And this is because extreme heat impacts the most vulnerable. So not only in terms of demographics like Latinx people or other people of color, but also the elderly and younger folks who can't regulate their body temperature safely. And so this is a huge public health concern. But because we have been so focused on, well, let's just protect the most expensive infrastructure, or let's only focus on the plants and animals, we've missed this whole public health issue. And so with extreme heat in areas that are not used to it, it is a problem. In Boston, like you said here too, in Boston, the infrastructure is just not meant for extreme heat. And so it's meant to keep warm air in during the winter time, and it has really drafty windows, you know. Same thing with schools. Schools don't have air conditioning, but now weather events are starting earlier when kids are still in school. And so that impacts people's cognitive health, and they're not able to think as clearly and can actually lead to other mental health issues, especially for developing children. And so again, it's a huge public health concern and we need to treat it as such. And so a couple of things that we're doing in Boston with my work is, first, we're figuring out where are these urban heat islands. And so urban heat islands are just what they sound like. They're little islands of extreme heat, or areas that are hotter than surrounding greener areas, because in the cities there's, you know, impervious surfaces that trap the heat instead of releasing it, like trees do and like other parks do. And so it's very important to put back some of that green infrastructure that we have taken out. And so this is another reason why we got to be tree huggers, because they also keep us cool and they also keep us healthy. And so another thing that kind of lies on top of all of these issues is the other environmental injustices that we face as people of color, is that many people of color have some asthma because they grew up in cities next to areas of lots of pollution, because they're typically also placed in areas where there's lots of people of color. And so during extreme heat events, that then impacts people who have asthma. And so over the summers, we've been working on giving out free air conditioners ever since the pandemic started, that are, you know, supposed to be cool and efficient, green and efficient. And so many mothers and family members have thanked us because they've just been worried about their children who have asthma not being able to sleep at night. And now with an AC, they're able to now feel a little bit safer about their children's health. So remember that this is climate change is a public health issue, and we need to treat it as such.
Thank you so much for framing it in that way, that climate change is a public health issue, because it really is, and like it affects every part of our lives. Unfortunately, with the way things are, often we don't see the effects of climate change till a little bit down the road. What we're doing today will affect tomorrow and the day after and the years to come. So there's unfortunately a lot more to come. But I love hearing the on the ground work that is going on, especially like you working on the community level, and then other type of work, some of what I do working from the higher up. And hopefully there can be a little bit more connection between that top-bottom approach, because I do definitely think that larger organizations and government could do a better job at connecting with individuals and communities.
Yeah, 100,000,000,000%. Yeah, for sure. And so, did you want to add anything else?
No, not on that topic.
Yeah. And so I'm curious what uh, advocacy is being done around your area that you can think of, either for the environment or for people, where people might be able to get involved.
Yeah, well, before I dive into like some of those more specifics, one thing I wanted to make sure is that we at least talked about advocacy and like and what that means.
Yeah.
We defined climate resilience. So like, let's talk about advocacy. One thing to note is that advocacy is often used in place of or intertwined with activism, and both are very important. They are not necessarily the same thing, but they can happen alongside each other. Um, Activism is usually it's easier to start and to get in, and it's really taking those like actionable steps. And it's really the best way to think about it is it's a way of making people listen about important issues and things that you care about. Advocacy is working to educate and make change, and it's um, it's uh, it's it's easy to see them as the same. People are often doing them at the same time. But advocacy really is that work that is working to change things, where activism is making people listen and making the issue known. Both are super necessary and important. And another thing that I want to make sure that everybody is clear with: you don't have to be an expert on a complete expert on a topic to be an activist or an advocate for it. Anyone can be an advocate or an activist. You just have to care about something, and you have to want to do something, and that's all it takes.
Yes,
Uh,
I love
yeah,
that. And remember that advocacy, like Alan said, can look in many different ways. It could be sharing a post, it could be sending a letter to whoever your congressperson is, or your representative. It could be calling and leaving a voicemail. It could be leading a whole ass march. Like, it could be so many different things. It depends on what you think that you're good at, what you want to how you want to use your voice. And so it can be low level and it can also be high level, kind of like what we're doing right now.
yeah. And I think another important point to remind people of, because I think we often forget, and I even forget myself, and I sometimes can be my own inner critic, is just because you need to take a break, or you need to do something a little bit differently, or you don't have to keep doing the same things over, and it's okay to take that rest sometimes, because rest is important, rest is powerful, rest is revolutionary. Just because you led a march one week does not mean you have to lead a march the next week. Maybe next week is just an Instagram post. Maybe next week you take off, and that's okay. Remember that there's a whole spectrum of things you can do, and you don't have to do them all at the same time.
Yes, exactly. Thanks for saying all of that.
Yeah, of course.
Rest is revolutionary. You need to take my own advice.
Yeah. um, but Melanie, do you have any tips specifically on how people can be advocates for their own community or for the climate?
Yes. So I am going to borrow from Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. Can I get some like shout outs in the chat if you know her? She's my hero. She is also a marine biologist and a climate justice advocate. She's an amazing woman of color. She just does so many amazing things. Anyways, she has put together this really helpful three-part diagram to figure out what you can do to join the climate movement. Because again, we're not all built the same. I love to talk about my work. I love this conversation right now. Other people might not love it, and that's totally fine. So step one is to figure out what angle of the climate movement you want to partake in. So is it education or any advocacy thing that you want to focus on? Is it education? Because climate impacts education. Um, is it immigration? Climate impacts immigration. Is it public health, as we just talked about? Are you a nurse and do you have something to give in regards to that? So what angle, is it the environment? We're all outdoor lovers here. So what part of the climate sphere do you want to focus in on? Because you just can't do it all. I can't do it all. Alan can't do it all. We all can do it all, but together. And so figure out that. Then figure out what angle you want to, or what voice you want to give to the room. So is it through art? Are you an artist? We need artists. Are you a filmmaker? We need filmmakers. I think everybody, can send out a post here and there. Are you a good writer? Is it something that you'd like to develop and use towards the climate movement? So that's two things. So again, figuring out what part of the climate world you want to partake in, what angle you're coming in from, and then how you're going to do that. And then third is what brings you joy. So figure out from all of this, what is actually bringing you joy? Is it joining Glow and helping us with climate because you really love this community? Is it something totally different? Because like Alan said, we all need rest and restoration because this is really hard stuff, and it's not a race, it's a marathon. And so we have to figure out how to bring joy to all of this work, whether it be climate advocacy or another type of advocacy. So those would be my tips. And then if you want to get involved, there's so many organizations working on this. And if you want to start up something, I also highly suggest that, like maybe at your local library, you could start a climate justice book club and have these conversations. Who knows? Who knows what it could be? What about you, Alan? What do you think?
I think those were all great points. And one thing that I do want to add, though, is that I want to reemphasize that anyone can be an advocate, and that includes old people, young people, people of any age, documented and undocumented. Anyone can be an advocate. Even as an undocumented person, you have the right to reach out to your representative and let them know and hear your voice. Making sure undocumented people need to. It's great to make sure that you are counted in the census and know that your people are represented and that you are speaking for your community. I had the pleasure to work with many undocumented folks in the past and some of my job. I used to work as an advocate in Washington, D.C. for workers' rights. And I learned a lot about how to be an advocate there, and then really how to help connect people with resources. Being undocumented, of course, has its own challenges, but it's important to learn what's going on specifically in your area and how you connect and how you can keep yourself safe. And sometimes it's baby steps, sometimes it's learning what you're comfortable with, but just know no matter your status, your age, your gender, your sexual orientation, anyone can be an advocate for any issue.
I love that. Thanks for bringing all of that up. I want to add that you also, if you're specifically focusing on climate, you don't need to be a scientist. You don't, like, I just happened to fall into this through whatever winding roads I took, but you really don't need to know the equation to greenhouse gas emissions. You don't know how many parts per million are out there right now. All you need to know is how it's impacting you and your community, and only you can tell that story. So only we as Latinos and other folks who are experiencing harm from so many other social injustices, only we can tell that story. And so that is what advocacy is all about. And so, don't worry about the facts. Some people are really scared to talk about climate, but all you need to know is the climate is warming. Humans have done that, and now it's impacting us, and we need to figure out how to solve it right now and for our future generations.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. I will be honest. I was when we were first planning this chat, I was a little bit nervous. I'm like, I'm not a scientist. Like, I know what climate resilience is, but I don't know if I couldn't write a paper on it. But then I realized that science is important and science is necessary, but it's not the only way to fight climate change. Advocacy is important. Talking to people is important. Learning and advocating for the things you believe in is important. It's great to learn the science along the way, learn what you can, but it's not the only way to tackle climate change. In a way, we are you being here and us having this conversation. This is tackling climate change in our own way.
Exactly. Talking about it is always the first step in any big major issue. Like, yeah.
So Melanie, it's so Latino Advocacy Week is happening right now. It started yesterday and it goes until the 19th. Um, do you have any advice for people watching right now who love nature and have a passion for climate? And if they want to make a difference, I know we've already talked about some ways to be an advocate, but do you have any other closing advice about what they can do and just to help themselves grow in this environment?
Yeah, definitely. So I think right now, one thing that you could do as us nature lovers is continue getting outdoors and continue documenting for your own personal story and then for your community how our climate is changing. So start to gather all of those stories because you never know how that may be able to be used in the future. The next thing that I would do is, work on that diagram that I talked about. What is most important to you in regards to climate? Is it nature? Is it education? Is it public health? What is it? Um, Figure out how you want to go about that via your own voice. Are you a good writer? Are you an artist? Can are you a social media influencer? And then how to get joy from all of this. And then the next step would be to figure out what avenue you want to take that in. So there's so many organizations that are working on this right now locally. I would say it's really important to start local. And so could you attend, I don't know, your town planning board meeting or your school board if you're a parent and participating in that? How can you influence some climate solutions via that way? If you don't have time to volunteer there, because we don't all have we're all crunched for time. And so, could you do your own self-education and share with your community and have conversations like me and Alan are having right now, but have it with your family or your, chosen family? How can you start to share this knowledge, both integrating it for your own life and then also paying that forward to others? So again, there's so many low hanging fruits that you don't have to spend way too much time on and learn all of the science about. And then there's lots of bigger things that you can do. Like you can, if you're a youth advocate, perhaps you can volunteer for your local chapter of Sunrise. If you're older, could you participate in some public health meetings for your town or your city or your county? So there's lots of different things that are possible, and so you just have to determine what angle you want to start from.
That's all really great. And I thanks you so much for talking about the participating in the public process. I know that's something I can be a little bit better about, but it's not always the way that I want to participate. So thank you so much. One thing that I just want to add too is just make sure you're doing what fits in your community. There is no one size fits all for anything really. Just because two communities are tackling the same issue doesn't mean that the same tactic or the same strategies are going to work in both communities. Just make sure you're working what's good for you and your community. And then also don't be afraid to mess up. We're all learning. We're all trying our best. And when you do make those mess ups, take them as a learning opportunity to just improve yourself and be better. Making mistakes is a part of the process, and nobody's perfect. And it's going to take time to refine your process and refine what you want to do and what you want to accomplish.
Totally.
And the last.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
The other thing is that we're all lifelong learners here, and climate in particular is a really ever evolving field in general. And as it becomes bigger and bigger, who knows, maybe you could pivot and you could end up working in something like this. You could transfer some of the knowledge that you have and end up working for it. Who knows? But we're all lifelong learners here. And one day we may know something, and the next day we may learn something totally different, and it will set us on a different track. So be open to learning and being able to change courses too.
Yeah, it really can happen by accident. Sometimes I really do think that happened to me sometimes. I like I said earlier, I got involved in this world because I posted a picture of myself outside, and all of a sudden, I'm working for the National Park Service and volunteering with LO, and it just happened. One happy incident led to another, and here we are.
Exactly.
Um, the last piece of advice I want to give, and I think it's really important, not only in advocacy, but in really anything that you do and anything that you're passionate about, is really make sure that you reflect on why you want to do this. Like, why is this important to you? And it can really help you understand your values and reflect on why you're doing this. Because sometimes, especially on larger corporations, when they often do type social justice type work. Sometimes it is just for show, but however, sometimes it really is genuine, both from individuals and for corporations and from larger entities. But just make sure you're doing it for reasons that align with your values and really have that conversation with yourself.
Exactly. That's so beautiful. Thank you, Ellen. It all comes from the heart. So you have to lead with whatever brings you joy. And if you don't do that, then it's going to be really hard and painful on an already hard and painful subject, for sure. Amazing. And so do you have any more questions before we start to wrap up?
um, I was actually curious, as I just since we've been talking so much about climate resilience and advocacy and the work that we do, I was really curious. Could you let me know about LO in Boston? What are you working on, and then where can we find some more information about your chapter?
Yes, I would love to let you know. I'm just gonna plug in my phone. I think it's, of course, gonna die because those phones do that when you're trying to do something important. All right. So, Low Boston is a relatively new chapter. So, Low Massachusetts has been on board for about 2 years now, led by the Western Mass group. So, Sebastian Moreno is the program coordinator out there, and I started shadowing them last year, actually around this time, to learn more about it, knowing that there wasn't a Low Boston in the area, and I'm from the Boston area, and wanted to see what was up and how I could get involved. And so ever since then, we've linked up, and then I have been partnering with different organizations out here to co-sponsor some programs together, since I don't have any other volunteers. So if anybody is listening from the Boston area, please join me. There's a couple of people who are already interested in joining my volunteer leader crew. So if you're one of them, please let me know. And we've done a few programs, mostly family oriented, and now I'm gearing up for the summertime, and I have some exciting news about that. So we've been doing programming mostly around birding. So I am also a birder, or at least I pretend to be one, and follow along my bird friend who knows it all, and just try to get all of his knowledge into my brain. And so I've led some bird programs. I try to lead them mostly in Spanish. There's a lot of new immigrant communities out here. And so leading programs in Spanish just gives me like a special kind of type of joy. um, and then a really fun event that I did was Calabaza y Cumbia. So out here on the East Coast, there's not a lot of cumbia playing, okay? So I have to make spaces for cumbia to play. And so I made this event called Calabaza en Cumbia during the fall. And so we carved calabaza is pumpkins. And so we carved some pumpkins and listened to cumbia. And I made some really great connections that actually a family of Latinos from the Southwest joined, and they're actually biologists and artists. And now I'm contracting them to help me on one of my projects on urban heat. So, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And what we're planning for the summer is some travel opportunities to the Boston Harbor Islands. And so the Boston Harbor Islands are just like little islands in the Boston Harbor. And they're not, people don't really live there, but they're a really beautiful escape away from the city, lots of nature, really sweet hiking. And also swimming. And so I'm planning some trips out there in collaboration with some previous organizations that I've worked with to get free ferry tickets and access to Latinos out there and have one overnight camping trip. I'm starting with one, and then seeing where we go from there for future years. But I'm very excited about this. There's so many organizations that are tailoring to Latinx communities in the Boston region, and I just can't wait to make this happen for everybody. And as we all know, access to blue and to green spaces is really hard for people of color and Latinos, and many people have never, been on a boat. Many people don't know that the Boston Harbor Islands are there, or that they're there for them too. So I'm very excited to make that connection and to make it happen. So that's what's up with Low Boston. So again, if you want to join me as my volunteer crew, please let me know. What about you, Alan? What's going on over in Low Seattle?
Well, so I am very excited for everything that is in the pipeline for us. During the pandemic, we did mostly virtual events. We did a handful of those, but I'm so excited for a lot of the in-person events that are coming. None are officially posted yet, but I do feel comfortable sharing at least the first one coming up in early May. We will be partnering with Outdoor Afro and our local chapter of Defenders of Wildlife down in Tacoma, and we are going to be doing a bear awareness training.
Oh
A
my God,
lot
that's
of
so
the
cool.
we do we tend to do it once a year, and super excited. A lot of our backcountry and wilderness areas here have black bears, and a couple of grizzlies, not too many. But those are most in a different part of the state. But anyway, we're going to be teaching people how to use bear spray and how to keep themselves safe in the backcountry, and really just be aware of your surroundings. Be aware, be bear aware. I'm working on a tagline. Let me know if you have any ideas.
Work in
Um,
progress.
but yeah, we'll be doing that in May. And one thing I'm really excited about is so the Defenders of Wildlife, they're the ones who have usually given the training. However, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach now that we've done it for a few years. We're really looking toward training volunteers to give these trainings. So that would be like Outdoor Afro volunteers, Latino Outdoors volunteers. And we want to make these trainings culturally relevant to our communities, and making sure that it hits right with the people we want to connect with. So we're working on redoing those materials, and I'm really excited for that. Some other things that we have going on is we're working with Washington State Parks Foundation to hopefully get a camping trip set up later this summer. Details and dates are still being sorted out, but we have some camping trips coming up. We'll be actually tabling at REI this weekend in Seattle, so come see us. We'll be just talking to folks, making sure we're getting our name out there. Um, but other than that, we are really just focusing in on getting our name back out there, rebuilding a lot of those community connections that we have. Because I'm very fortunate. When I joined LO Seattle, had been one of the oldest chapters in the country. So there is a lot of community partners, and there's lots of good relationships. So I felt very fortunate stepping into this role as program coordinator. A lot of the work has been done for me, and I'm trying to help build that and take it to the next step. Which actually reminds me of a point on advocacy. Like, don't be afraid to help others, and jump on the work and support work that they're already doing. You don't have to make something from scratch to be the most effective. That's really how I see LO. Is I want to help support the work that other volunteers are already doing, and help us all bring our message up to the top, because we really are working toward the same often are working toward the same goal. Yeah, but those are some of the events that we have coming up. And if you want to know more, I recommend following us. Our Instagram handle is LO Seattle WA, WA like Washington, LO Seattle WA. Follow us there, and you can find out some more information.
Amazing. Thank you. And then our handle, we have a joint, like Massachusetts as a whole account, is LO_Massachusetts. And I also didn't preface our intro by saying that I am on Indigenous Pawtucket lands and Massachusetts lands. And so many people don't know that our state name actually comes from the Indigenous group, the Massachusetts tribe. And so want to definitely pay honor to that and all of the people, past, present, and future, who have really tended to this land in ways that we are not doing such a great job in now, and in ways that we really need to go back to and get back to our indigeneity in this area. And then on the Boston Harbor Islands, it was mostly Wampanoag people as well. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And just to share, I'm in Seattle, and I'm on Coast Salish lands. But just want to preface that Coast Salish is it's really a broader term, and it often refers to a language group. And there are many peoples from who are originally from this area and have stewarded the land for thousands of years. And then I do want to take a step back as well and just acknowledge that land acknowledgements are often just the bare minimum about what we can do to acknowledge the work and the history of Indigenous people. It really is up to us to learn more about Indigenous cultures. Indigenous people are still here. We should not talk about them like they are. Talk about Indigenous people like they are in the past. They're here. They are doing work. It's important to donate, to do what you can to help bring Indigenous voices to the top.
And this is also part of our role in advocacy. Thank you for sharing that.
Before we open it up to questions, I just want to do a little plug. Make sure to check out latinaoutdoors.org for events in the Seattle and Boston area, as well as the rest of the country. And then also just check out the other cool resources. We still have some resources from our stay-at-home initiative while we were most of the country was in a pretty tight lockdown, and there's even a jobs board there. I posted a few things there before as well. And then also check out latinoadvocacyweek.org. You can find some signature online events there and just learn more about what Latino Advocacy Week is.
And advocate for whatever you want. Make sure to do so within whatever time you have allowed. So we would love to open it up for questions now. So if you want to put some questions in the chat, that would be wonderful. Apologies if you already did, but we may have missed them. Well, my favorite event by far has been the Calabaza en Cumbia event.
I love that name.
That I had in the fall. I know, it's definitely going to be an annual thing now. So if you didn't get to hear, I live out here in Boston. There's not much cumbia that is played out here. It's just not part of the culture. And in Chile, that's basically what I'm from Chile originally. That's what we play. So we don't necessarily play salsa too much. We're more of the cumbia gang, and loved creating a fall specific event called Calabaza y Cumbia. And calabaza means pumpkin, and cumbia is the type of music and dance. And so we had such a blast carving pumpkins while listening to cumbia, and people really enjoyed it. It was so much fun. What about you? Do you have a favorite event?
I think my favorite event, I am so sorry, but I am forgetting what the name we used for the event was, but I can describe it. It was actually when I was back in DC, and we did a presentation, an intro to rock climbing presentation for queer Latinx youth. And it was a two-parter. We did that presentation, and then on another day, we took them out to a rock climbing gym, and we took them rock climbing for the first time. It was teenagers to young adults. It was a really fun event. I had just gotten into rock climbing at the time, so I really loved it. And, they were some of them were really scared to go on the wall the first time, and then we finally got them on the wall, and it was great.
That is amazing. Sounds so cool. And then I see some question about if there's a Latino Outdoors in Atlanta, and we don't have any chapter in Atlanta right now, but Latinos Running, if you would like to create one, that may be a possibility. I think we're taking a break from creating new chapters right now because of capacity for the Latino Outdoors staff right now. But if you want to drop a line, you can check out the email to email either Ruby or Luis Rincon to see what can be done there. But no Latino Outdoors in Atlanta right now. And then are all events posted on the Latino Outdoors website? I don't see any in my area. We're still growing, so please just continue to check in your area. Because the chapters are volunteer run, so Alan and I are volunteers doing this on our spare time. You know, some things may be more sporadic than others. Some chapters may have more volunteer staffing available, and so we just encourage you to keep checking online for that for sure. And then also make sure to sign up for newsletters and all of that stuff so that then you can be in the know. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and if you are like somewhat close to a chapter, but that might be like a state away, sometimes you can maybe support them virtually if you really want to volunteer or go to an event. I recommend doing that if your time allows. There's no harm in reaching out. We are almost at the hour, but do you have time for another question or two, Melanie?
Definitely, yes.
All right. I see another question here in the chat from Luis, actually. And the question is, will you each share a story of connection to the outdoors?
Sure. Do you want to start off?
Sure. One, like I said, I didn't grow up participating in the outdoors a whole lot, but as I grew and started to reflect on what it actually meant to be outdoors, and I realized it doesn't need to be on a mountain or on a trail, and it can mean anything. One thing that I remember and I hold really fondly in my heart is my grandpa was an excellent gardener. He could make anything grow anywhere. I don't know how he did it, but we had we were at this rental property. There was a big yard, and he showed us how to garden. We grew tomatoes, peppers, corn, a variety of things. And I don't know how he like knew all this knowledge. He just said he knew it. He was from Jalisco in Mexico, and he lived in the U.S. for about 60 years, and he just knew all these little tricks and just like how to rake the soil well so it doesn't get the leaves too dirty and it doesn't like trick them with the sunlight. He taught me so many nuanced tips, and I don't know how his brain had so much information in it, but I hold that really fondly in my heart. Unfortunately, he did pass away, but I cherish those memories even more now. And I just think of when I see peppers and tomatoes, I really do think of that garden that we grew together.
That's amazing. That is so lovely. Thanks so much for sharing that. And we gotta hold all of our ancestors, you know, from far away or from close by, really dearly in our hearts. They teach us so much and continue to do so. Yeah, I'll share a little bit about my connection to the outdoors, and then I think we can close out. So my connection with the outdoors, as I shared right in the beginning, it really starts with my homeland. So I'm originally from Chile, and I was born there and immigrated to the Northeast when I was I think I was like 7 or 8. No, I was 7. But those memories of growing up in Chile in my early part of my childhood just stand out to me because we would go to the beach all the time. So the beaches in Chile are very similar to those in California, so cold, but in a really nice way. At least I like to think of it, with amazing waves. And so I have this passion of being in the water because of my dad. He is always the first one in and the last one out of the water with me. He, you know, taught me how to swim. When I was just a couple months old, he just kind of dunked me under the water and then took me back out because he knew that babies could somewhat hold their breath when they're pretty newborn. And so I don't remember a time when I don't know how to swim. So I'm a little sirena or mermaid, hence my handle. And we transferred all of that passion over to the East Coast on the Atlantic Ocean and just have continued going to the beach for very, very long days in the summertime out here. And then as an adult, I learned that hiking mountains was a thing. And in Chile, we're surrounded by mountains, so I always feel safe within mountains. But in Boston, there's no mountains. We have to go up north to New Hampshire and Maine. And so that has been like my next point of contact with nature is all you need are hiking shoes and you just go up a mountain. It's just gorgeous. And now I get to do that back in Chile with my cousins, and it's such an amazing bonding experience. So the ocean and mountains are just very, very special to me, and that's my main contact with nature. Yeah. Thanks for asking that, Luis.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Melanie, for sharing that. And actually, it works perfectly. I was scrolling, and there was another question in the chat. It was taught, and the question was about how did we get introduced to the outdoors? And I think we both answered that to some degree, in talking about these early memories. So great conversationalists, great stories, great answers, and I want to thank you so much for chatting with me today about advocacy and climate resilience.
I love this.